written multiple blogs about it, have implemented for different customers across industries. But this is for the first time I'm addressing any audience or any user group when it comes to control tasks. So the excitement is same at my end too. And as Nambi mentioned, I always love to have more interactive sessions, right? Uh, Content is more designed for you guys. So I want to make sure that you learn it. And whatever the time frame we have, this 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, let's make sure that you have the best of learning from my end. So if you feel I'm going too fast, too slow, or you have some questions, please raise your hands. Let me know if you have any questions, any scenarios. I'll be happy to help about that. So, Nami, are we good to go? Should we start?
Yeah. For everybody's information, so we are recording this session. So just as an information for everybody. Yeah, we're good, Sanchit. I think you can see your screen.
Cool. Let me share my screen. 1 second. And yeah, for all the audience out there, there is a smiley option here on the screen just before the screen share. So you can just give your vote if you have understood it, if you can see my screen and other stuff. So is my screen visible for everyone? Cool. I think everyone awesome. So folks based out of India, I hope you had your breakfast. It's 11:10. And for the folks joining from rest of the world, outside Australia and Sydney, I think you would have a wonderful dinner. So let's be very enthusiastic to get this session rolling. So as Nambi mentioned, we'll talk about today cloud security governance, AWS control tower. I'll more talk about why it is important, right? What exactly is very valuable about this solution or framework, why this has become talk of the town recently. Like in any events which you see of AWS, you talk about AWS Summit, Dev Days, reInvent, or you talk about Reinforce. There is one or other session enforcing or talking about control tower, right? So, as the name suggests, cloud security governance, AWS control tower, set up and governs a secure multi-account AWS environment, right? So that makes it more important for us to understand what exactly this control tower. From I think this one liner at the bottom makes it very clear what we are going to talk about today. From an agenda standpoint, we will be talking about why we need AWS control tower. What do you think about it? The framework and services, how we all get together, demo and FAQ, right? So I'll make sure at the end of this session, after going this 2 hours, you have decent knowledge of practical demo, which makes you comfortable to deploy this landing zone or the control tower for your organization. From a speaker standpoint, I think Nami did a fantastic job to talk about it. I'll just put a cherry on cake. So my name is Sanchit. I'm based out of Mumbai in India. I'm a data analytics practice lead at Quantify. It's a premier consulting partner. That's how I have an experience working with different customers, talking about landing zone or any analytics solution. From a recognition standpoint, I'm an AWS community hero, AWS ambassador, MVP by multiple cloud for you, as well as an AWS user group Mumbai lead. So those are the different recognitions which I have gathered over a couple of years from the industry. From an different event standpoint, I have given a talk at last year reInvent, AWS Summit India, as well as community days and various user groups, as well as community colleges and universities. From all of those talks, I always love to talk to different colleges and universities and institutes because that's how people love. Those are the bright minds who are going to join the industries. So yes, I love to talk about internationally, nationally, all different conferences, but addressing the college students or educational institute is the favorite where I love to do. And I make sure that I do it like 1 or 2 slots every quarter. So that's about what I have done. And you can follow me at LinkedIn, Twitter, and GitHub. So just in case if we run out of the time, I'm unable to address any of your questions related to your career or how you want to grow around on AWS or on the cloud, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm very much active on both of the forums. And if you want to follow about my different blogs or other stuff, you can reach out to, you can just follow me on GitHub. I publish all of my blogs on the GitHub forum. Now let's start to the agenda of today's session, why we need an AWS control tower or what exactly is this control tower. So I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure most of you guys would have known this architecture. So may I know how many people have seen some similar kind of weird architecture talking about different accounts and all? How many people have would have known this? May can I get a quick vote from the audience? How many people? Please raise your hands for any questions. If you agree, just give a yes or no in the chat or a smiley. Cool. I'll quickly recap what exactly is this for the people who have not seen this architecture or hearing for the first time, right? Most of the scenarios we always work in an SDLC process, right? Software development lifecycle, where you have the dev environment, you have your test environment, UAT, production. Differs from customer to customer as well as the terms, right? But generally, you have this different life cycle around it. And then you have this entire security team, DevOps team, then you have this master account. And then for even a workload where let's say you are building a simple web application, you see you have like this easily somewhere around like 6 to 7 different accounts, right? Where either you get confused now why I am having this multiple accounts, I can do that segregation via VPC also, or why I want to, I mean, how I manage this different accounts if you're not having this VPC. So that gets into very complex scenarios. Is there something, a magic button which helps me to follow the security posture, the best practices, but I don't want to get into this complexity, right? I want to focus purely on building my applications. So that's where this comes into this accounts around that. I've seen different companies. I won't quote them here. I think Nambi would also agree. They have like easily the customers having more than 100 accounts. So here I'm talking about 6, 7 accounts. There are customers, and I'm pretty sure in your organization, when you work with different customers or in your organizations, when you are talking and dealing with like Fortune 100, 500s, they easily have like 100, 200 plus accounts. Think of here we're talking and managing 6 accounts also becoming difficult. Let's think about the customers or the organization where you have 100 plus accounts. So that is the scale where it becomes so difficult, so tedious to manage accounts. Something get breaks in one account, something is deleting in another account, how we can manage the securities. So that's how this account used to be there. And this, I would say, personally, I have also implemented for many customers somewhere between 2016 to 2018. And we used to follow this accounts. Now, there are many people who are maybe looking at the first time and they may say, why I need this multiple accounts, right? So the simple answers is you have multiple teams, right? When we say 100, 200 accounts, it's a large organization where millions of people are working around. There are multiple teams, right? Multiple teams. I'm not talking about the finance team and the business team. Even in the business team, there are multiple teams you have, right? Some maybe from the commercial standpoint, some maybe customer standpoint, some may have a sales line, some may have a different LOB. So different kind of teams what you have based on the business. Then there are different business processes, right? Absolutely. The sales team would be more interested around how many customers are engaging with them. Whereas the data engineering or the data insight team will be more interested on the insights which are generated. The billing team will have a different perspective. And same, more you want to ensure the way you have the multiple teams, the business processes, there's a segregated proper billing track has been there because you have your own KRAs, the financial numbers at the end of the year, right? At the beginning of the year, you get it. This is what you can spend in terms of innovation. So how we can clearly draw that boundaries in terms of billing as well as isolation and security. Even though everyone is a part of same one organization, but the 4C, the governance, what they have to process the data is not the same, right? Like for a very simple example, the finance team is operating on the financial data of the customer. The HR is operating the recruitment data or the HR data of the employees. Now you cannot swap, or the financial team cannot have the access of the recruitment, the HR cannot have the access of the financial, right? For a simple example. So you need an isolation and security. Even the nature of data is the same, but the way and the impact that data can make is different. So you need an isolations and security. That's where we see that there are multiple accounts are there, and that's where people generally, before even the control tower was in the system or was in, there was something called as control tower, people used to ensure that they have multiple accounts. to draw out that clear boundary in terms of billing and isolations in terms of the governance and the responsibilities. But still, there were many people, and personally, I have also seen many customers do ask me, "Hey, I can achieve the same thing with IAM and VPC in one account. Why you want to get into this multiple accounts, right? For a simple web application, you're asking me to spin up 6 different accounts where I can do the simple thing IAM and VPC." Absolutely. I'm not saying that you can rule out the VPC or the one account structure, but I always, this is what my answer has to be for all the people out here or to my customers has been, it all depends on how you want to scale out your workload, right? Now, if you are an organization where you are not worried about security, ideally every organization should be worried about security, but you are someone who's more focused on business to begin with, you're just starting your journey on the cloud and you don't have very trained folks, then absolutely you can start small, scale out later. There you can go with VPC, but make sure that journey needs to be limited to couple of months, which is not more than 6 to 8 months. If you're thinking a posture where you're going to scale your adoption on the cloud, where you're going to have multiple teams, multiple workloads, then absolutely this structure will not going to help. Maybe you can start with this structure in the dev environment, but as you go close to the production environment, multiple accounts is the right posture, irrespective whether you use landing zone, control tower or not. But multiple account is that clean, neat, and hygiene way to handle your workloads, handle the team, and isolate and have a proper governance structure. And the reason is very clear. When you have IAMs and VPCs, all the services on AWS are not regional. For example, very simple, IAM is not a regional service. So now if you are opening an access for a specific region, now how you can restrict that on the workload basis? Let's say you have the dev environment, you have UAT, you have prod, and you have all of these VPC environments either in the same region within the account or in multiple regions within the account. How you will restrict the IAMs? I mean, absolutely, you can do some conditions and some taggings of resources and all, but there are some resources which you can't even tag. So then, how you're going to restrict the conditions? Very simple example. Even for S3 to work, you need to give the list permission to all the buckets in that account. So absolutely, now as an end user or as an one of the employee, I know what are the different buckets are there in that access. So you can handle that in a clumsy way. It's not very clearly defined, right? So that is a problem when it comes to IAM and VPC in one account, whereas the how multiple accounts of AWS can help you to streamline that stuff. Now moving towards the previous process, right? And I think most of you would have already gone through this, whether you are working as a customer or you're working or you're serving any customer. The general cycle is there is a development teams where you request for that there is a new account requirement is right. So you go and put a ticketing system. Now ticketing system can be anywhere, like it's a Zendesk or Salesforce. I mean anywhere your custom tool, right? Not to worry about. But as a team, business team, development team, you ask, I need an AWS account. So it goes to a ticketing system where a system admin, you call it a system admin or a DevOps team or a cloud admin team, whatever you name them. It goes to them. Then there's the cycle starts. Why do you need it? What are the permissions? Who's going to do the billing? Where exactly it's going to integrate? That starts the entire back and forth happening between the development team and the system team. And that back and forth, I mean, it looks very tedious, but generally it takes like 1 week or a week and a half to solve that. And finally, you get that entire account, which is what you're looking for. And not only that, but then starts a new process of back and forth, which is around the IAM permissions. Now it starts, hey, I don't have an S3 list permission. I don't have an S3 delete permissions. So that starts around the back and forth with the admin team in terms of the IAM permissions. So that's how the previous process used to work. The challenge is what we have seen, right? If I summarize that, it's a very manual process in terms of there is no automated way, right? You can think of informal also in certain organization. I have not seen many organizations who have this proper ticketing systems and all, right? Again, depends on at what maturity states you are into. But in most of the organization I've seen, this is a manual process, informal. Sometimes either you give less of permission, which is good, or sometimes you give overly permission. Depends again how good you are or how good your system team is, system admin teams. The opaque user groups, not very clearly defined, lack of transparency, and legacy AWS access pattern. Like there is no very agile in state, right? And we all know that in this current economic time where we are, all the business team wants to be agile. You don't want to sit for weeks to just get the permission from the system team, right? I mean, in a week, you generally want to target and finish your user stories. So that's what the challenges, what we foresee. That's where we need like a proper orchestration framework. Now that why do you need that orchestration framework, right? So orchestration framework, if I summarize whatever I mentioned in last 15 minutes or 20 minutes, you not only need a proper AWS account structure, you also need a governance, you also need a security, right? And you also need an isolation. That's where you see a proper orchestration framework which helps you for the account management, policy deployment, policy enforcement, any sorts of security remediation or flaws which have been identified, and proper notification. So that's why it's very important. Like you can manually, I mean, someone can debate with me. I can do the same thing manually. Absolutely. I don't deny. You can do it manually. But the time that will take to do this manually, which is not standardized, which is not documented, which is just all over the place, will be more clumsy and not repeatable. Right. So that's why you need a proper orchestration framework with the following capabilities: standardization, self service, security and compliance, automated, faster delivery, and less privilege access. Now, if I tell you that, okay, hey, the governance posture, what you have implemented, or your business or your manager tells you that, okay, hey, whatever you have implemented, you need to implement this across 10 customers, or you need to implement this across 10 different business units. For one of them, I can understand you can do it manually. But if I tell you you need to do it against 10, or if you need to do it against 20, you will simply give up. You will say, this is not my cup of tea. I need like another 40 people to implement this, which is not viable, because what you're doing is just setting up or getting the stepping stone for a customer or for your team to the cloud. And that's exactly where we see the survivor comes into the place, called as AWS Control Tower. AWS Control Tower is nothing but where you manage, I mean, the same thing, right? If anyone on this call who's from a security standpoint, they know there is something called as manage continuously, right? Build, enable, and manage continuously. That kind of life cycle keep going. And that's how the Control Tower framework has been. That you set up the landing zone, establish the guardrail, automate the compliance provisioning, and centralize the identity and access management. So that's how the entire circle of control tower starts, which is the best part of this control tower is not one time you deploy and you go ahead, but you manage it continuously, right? Continuously managing in terms of, you all know that as we start using the things on the cloud or something, you have to evolve. The requirement changes or requirement evolves, right? Very simple example can be when you start developing any web application, you start small, right? Maybe you start with just S3 access or EC2 deployment. But as you start going and adapting yourself, you go towards ECS containers, you go to Kubernetes, you go to DynamoDB. So there are requirements. The permissions of the services also evolved over a period of time. So not only control tower help you to get that right posture in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the security compliances, or in terms of the scale and agility for your business. So that's why AWS Control Tower has been the talk of the town from the day it has launched in the market. There are certain terms which I have also used very interchangeable during this entire session. And I think you would have also heard in the market if you are dealing or if you have heard something from your customer or from internally, right? One is called as landing zone. Second is called as AWS landing zone. And third is called as a control tower. Landing zone is something called as a pre-configured environment for your AWS presence, right? So landing zone is that framework. You can think of that framework, right? Framework or that entire actual blueprint which is in live in your account, which is called as landing zone. The AWS landing zone is a solution to implement that, right? The framework or the entire posture of it. And control tower is the service to enable it. Now, you will see some of the customers or some of the implementations where people would have enabled AWS landing zone. So don't get confused. I'll give you a backstory about this. somewhere in 2019 or early 2020, AWS recognized and enabled or launched an entire solution. Now, AWS do launch a couple of solutions on GitHub, right? To enable or to help their customer to adopt their or accelerate their journey on AWS. Landing Zone was one of them. Previously, AWS launched a couple of cloud formation called as Landing Zone solution in early 2019, 2020, I'm talking about, where people started leveraging landing zone and started doing the cloud formation. I have personally also deployed for one or two customers using the cloud formation. And my experience was very difficult. Like, it helps me to solve the problem, but the process and the way I have to go to deploy that cloud formation was very clumsy. If you make one single mistake, you're done. Done in the sense is like not only you have to redeploy, but you have to redeploy the entire AWS account. There was no capability to roll back, as well as not even a capability to onboard an existing AWS account. So that was the feedback given to the AWS team, operational team, and they launched a service called as Control Tower. So now AWS Control Tower is a service which simplifies the deployment of the landing zone. So now you can do everything. If you have, let's say, you are already an AWS customer, you don't have a landing zone, you have like 3 or 4 accounts, and you want to do landing zone now. You can leverage Control Tower and onboard the existing accounts also, which was a drawback in the cloud formation or the solution when we had this. So that's why don't get confused yourself. Control Tower is the AWS service which help you to deploy landing zone. And if you use something called as AWS landing zone solution, then do remember that is the AWS cloud formations which used to provide the landing zone approach previously before the Control Tower. Now we'll move towards the implementation. I'll take a pause. I mean, we are going to go ahead here with the demo. So I'll take a pause here and I'll move if you have any questions.
Sanchit, not a question, but I've also heard in some with some customer, I'm hearing they're using a term landing zone to represent an bootstrapped AWS account. So my understanding was, and a landing zone is the multi-account setup, but I also hear when they say landing zone, they also represent an AWS account, which is provisioned and given it to the business unit for their usage.
I would accept it. Even I used to do I have also done the same in 2018, right? So the reason is there are many MSPs, right? I think most of the people would know about this term called as MSPs, managed service providers. So all the managed service providers, many organizations, somewhere in 2017, 18, have launched their own framework, right? Own framework to secure the accounts, own framework to provide the securities and best practices, right? The same example when I'm talking about when you're dealing 100 accounts, you need some sort of an automation. You need some sort of that framework. And that framework they started referring as a landing zone. Now, I won't deny, I'm not sure how much that overlaps with AWS because this entire thing is an open source thing. Like as of today, also, you can customize the control tower. Absolutely. Cloud Formation was just an open source. You can play around. But not only that, you can also customize the control tower, right? So it depends on organization what exactly you are referring to landing zone. But in a technical scenario, landing zone is like a solution which is proper guardrail and the best practices. So I won't get into the debates of whether my landing zone framework is better than AWS or AWS is better than mine. End of the day, it all matters if you're getting that agility, if you're getting that security, and if you're getting that proper structure with your landing zone approach also. Absolutely. That's the thing. The whole idea is that you get something which is continuously managing and giving you that right security posture.
So there are a few questions. Do you want to take it now or at the
Sure.
end?
No, I'll take it now itself before we go on the demo. So what's a maximum number on the number of accounts in AWS Control Tower? So first of all, there are no such as limits in terms of the maximum number of accounts. Absolutely, there are certain limits, soft limits, which are there on the AWS account APIs. But in terms of Control Tower, you're good enough. That should not be a problem. Like you can easily have like 200, 300 accounts at minimum. How does Control Tower integrates with third-party automation solution like Terraform and others? Absolutely, very good question. So AWS Control Tower also has the CDK version and Terraform. Recently, as of 2023, I think somewhere January and February, they launched the entire process called as Account Factory. Now we will come up to that process also, Account Factory. I don't want to talk about that for now. I'll keep it paused for a couple of more slides, where Terraform also supports that. So if you are the person, or if you are the organization which are a fan of Terraform or a fan of CDK, not CloudFormation, absolutely don't worry about it. You can still leverage CDK as well as the Terraform for deploying the control tower. Uh, is third point is it possible to move the billing account to control tower? Absolutely. So not only the billing account, right? So I'll show out the how the OU structure looks like. Control tower is for everything. It's not just for billing account. It's for network. It's for log monitoring. It's for security. Everything is for, you have to move it to control tower. So that's how it becomes your end-to-end framework. How does control tower differ from AWS organization? I would pause this question for now. I'll take it up later on once we go, because I have a slide for this one to talk about it. Service catalog is part of AWS control tower. Answer is yes. Service catalog is part of AWS control tower. And I'll talk about how that looks like and where exactly you have the service control tower and other thing. So stay tuned for that. The next question is control tower and any security service integration, third party POV. Absolutely. So, control tower and third party integration. I think I'll take a pause on this question when we go to the OU structure, like in 2 slides. I will talk about where exactly what I have seen in the trends in the things. So, I'll address all the last 4 questions, right? Rishi, Rahul, then someone has given my iPad as well as Rahul. Uh, I'll address all of this question in shortly. First, let me switch it to the demo so we can start, because the demo of control tower itself will take 1 hour to deploy. For me to kick off will take 5 minutes, but it will take like 1 hour to get the entire solution deploy. So this is the brand new account, and this is a Gmail account and the brand new account which I have deployed only for the demo as of yesterday late night India time, right, or early today morning. So this is a brand new account variable. So one of the things which you have to make sure, control tower will only get deployed if you are in the master OU account. What that means, if I go to the organization, one of the prereq or the important point is you cannot deploy control tower in the child account. Even though you are part of the same OU, you cannot deploy in the child account. You have to be in the main master account. That's one of the things. So now, many a times I see a scenario where people already have this entire OU and they get stuck. They're like, okay, now what should I do? I am already have this very OU architectures and other stuff, how I can get into this, right? So there it becomes very important for you that how exactly you can get out of that. So generally what I do as a tips and trick is I deploy a new master account. There I deploy landing zone or control tower, and all the other services and OU I import into that, which I'll talk about that into tips and tricks section. So as you can see, I don't even have any OU here. So this is a very, I think there was some echo. So you can see there's giving me an option also to deploy the OU. This is a brand new account, as I said, right? So we are good. That means we are in the not in the child account, because if you would be in the child account, you will see that your account is associated with some other master account, and you will see the name of it. So okay, I'll go to the control tower. So you can see AWS control tower. So let's start with the control tower. In the meantime, the console is loading. There are a couple of things what you will need when you're deploying the control tower. As I said, the first one is you need to be in the master OU account. The second one is you will need a bunch of email IDs, because the control tower is not going to set up the posture, but it also going to help you to deploy the new accounts and the OU structure with proper security. So step one, what we are going to do is set up the landing zone here, right? So set up the landing zone. As I said, don't get confused. Control tower is a service to set up the landing zone, right? So don't use this term interchangeable. Whenever you talk about landing zone, that means the actual framework, and control tower is that service to help you that. Now, from a step standpoint, here are the 5 steps what you will be doing to deploy the control tower. Deploy the landing zone. So one is the review pricing and select region, configure organization, configure shared account, additional configuration, and review and setup, right? So that's what we are going to do. As we go through the steps, I'll talk about couple of sections which will anyways cover in the presentation also. First, select the home region. So it's very important that you select the home region, right? Control tower is a regional deployment. Do remember that. It's a regional deployment. So again, it can stretch to multiple regions, but the home region is going to be one. So for our implementation, I'll select North Virginia. Now this is, so as I select the region, it got refreshed. I see there are a couple of questions coming. Please stay tuned. I'll just kick off this deployment and then we'll answer all the questions. Now this comes a region deny setting. Just remember this. I will address this in the presentation, but region deny setting I will mark as enable. Okay. Then comes, do you want to have any additional regions for governance? So the home region is this. You can select any additional regions which you want. Generally, I've seen when you're working with US customers, they are good. No, you enable them for all the regions and all. My suggestions or my request will be from a security posture standpoint, the minimum surface of attack you have, the better is for you. So unnecessarily don't expand to all the regions, but also be very wise that you don't shrink to it only one region. No, for a minimum DR or for other best practice standpoint, at least you should have enabled 2 regions. I mean, for a demo purpose, I will only enable 1 region. But for your actual implementation, always go with 2 to 3 regions, right? So, and that region selection you can internally decide because there are different factors in terms of proximity, cost, and other thing. But make sure that you have 2 to 3 regions selected. I'll go as next here. Now, by default, when I do landing zone deployment, right, it's going to come up with 2 OUs and couple of accounts. So 2 OUs, first one is the security, second is the sandbox. These are the names. You can change the names however you want, right? Like someone keep as like security as a shared, someone keep additional as a core. It completely your call. However you want to do it, you can play around with that, right? Generally keep the OU name which is more meaningful and aligned to your business requirements or the accounts which you're going to do it. So for all the people, right, who are hearing the term OU for the first time, OU is called as organization unit. I'm pretty sure you would have come across, I mean, you all know folders, right? And you create different folders or folders to keep the same files in that folder, right? So similarly, OU in a very simple language is that folder. All the different accounts, which are like files, similar files will be part of the same OUs, right? The advantage of doing the folder, right, in a simple layman language, easy to handle, easy to maintain, control, securities, and all. Same applies to the OU. That's a very simple layman language of what is OU and why do you need OU. So I'm not going to make any changes since it is a demo for environment. I'll go with the security and the sandbox. I'll click on next. As you can see, the account email ID of the master is already there, which I'll copy, and it's asking for the 2 options, right? As I said, the best advantage which I see of control tower is the capability to use the existing accounts, right? So you can use the existing accounts also in the landing zone, and or you can create the new account also. So what I would select here is new account, and I'll make this as one. Just make sure I'm using the same email ID and alias. So I'm giving a new account ID, and this is the name of the account. Now you can change this name, but I'll keep it the same, right? The same for the audit account. Now, generally, audit is a word which is used a lot in the security. So this account is where we'll have the security. So you can keep it audit or you can keep it security. I leave up to how you want to name that. Right? So this is a very simple form. What I have done, nothing. I've just select the region, right? I've given the OU names. I've given the account names and next. Now here there are two options. Either you can use control tower with AWS IAM Central out of the box, or you can set up your own. My recommendation is don't set up your own. You can do this. Then, if you want to make some changes, like you want to use Okta for SSO or you want to use something else, then you do that implementation. But I would always recommend that you use what is provided by control tower. The reason is it also gives you SSO and all other things also. So not only you're spinning up the accounts, but you also have the SSOs and other things coming out of the box, right? And then control cloud trail, right? Do you want to enable the cloud trail to capture all the events? I would say absolutely yes, but depends on do you want to do it or not. So you can say no or yes, right? Now this also says, right, when you say it, AWS also recommends that you use enabled. Lock configuration, how many years? And I think this is very depends on your compliance or which kind of industry you are, right? Healthcare, insurance, or retail. How long you want to do it, right? So number of years, number of days. I'll keep it for the 1 year, which is 365 days. Then optionally you can enable the KMS, disable the KMS. For now, I'm just keeping the KMS disabled and I'm going next year. So this is as simple. Like it took me hardly 5 minutes to fill out this simple form. And these are the information what we gave to the control tower, right? The OU, the different accounts, email IDs. Yes, I want to do it. What logs, cloud trail. And here I have to select. I'm pretty sure most of the people would have deployed the cloud formation. This is exactly what we do in cloud formation, right? And now when I select set up the landing zone, this will start deploying the entire landing zone framework, deploying all the accounts, deploying all the best practices in SSO. It will take like a few seconds to get into the page where it will really show us how much time it takes, right? So what I have done, nothing. Just 5 minutes, provide all sorts of best practice, all sorts of inputs, which are very simple inputs. And now AWS will take care to deploy everything. So what we will get out of the box when we are deploying this, two OUs, one for the shared account, one for the provision by the user, three shared accounts, right? You can have your own IAMs, which I said AWS SSO, and also the securities, right? 20 preventive controls and three detective controls by default will come. So in order to even deploy this minimum setup, I can bet easily a person will take half a day. If he is an expert, he will take half a day where we are getting this without any code, without any lines of codes, with just few email IDs and details in less than 60 minutes. So that's a simple ROI for the people if you want to convince to your business team. Whatever you can do it in less than, I mean, you need for a half a day or day, which you can do it in less than 60 minutes. And here, if I go back to my email box, you can also see that the accounts are already there. So if you see, both the accounts are already deployed. Plus 11, plus 12, the accounts are deployed 00 minutes back, right? So we will wait for this one. Let it get deployed. It will take 59 minutes. And there you will see the entire dashboard, like the entire OUs, the accounts, all sorts of controls here. So let it go at its speed. What we will do is I'll click on show status. And here in the show status, you will see the step-by-step approach. What exactly is happening here, right? Where exactly it stays and what's happening. So you get a complete transparency, which is what we talk about as a requirement. A standardized approach because everything is automated, right? Security, governance, and less of headache. Everything what control data is providing was our requirement when we did this entire thing in our own framework or manual way, whatever we talk about, or semi-automated. So that's what I was saying, why control tower has been or been the talk of the town in last couple of years. Now I'll move towards the questions. If you have any questions so far, please let me know. I'll go at the top. I think there were a couple of questions where they're around the accounts and other thing. I'll address that in the presentation. There was a question how to practice this lab. I think Nambi already shared the AWS workshop for the control tower. That's the best place to understand end to end about that. Can we add AWS China as a children, right? I need to check Sunil on that fold because I think China has some other policies around the stuff. So I need to check around how that works. Another thing, I'm not too sure about China AWS account. So I'll check and I'll get back to you offline.
And Sanchit, right now we provision two additional accounts, right? The log archive and audit account. And at the very basic, what are those resources that gets provisioned in the backend? I think a blank account gets created, but I think there should be some IAM permissions that should be, the
Yes.
script depends in the backend should be doing something.
Correct. So basically, at the account, good question. I think when you deploy the new account, those accounts are very blank, right? Very new. What you get is first SSO integrated. So I'll show that SSO email also coming into my email box. I will accept it. So not only those new accounts. I mean, generally the new accounts comes blank. So here, when you deploy a new account, it's a new account plus it's already integrated with the AWS SSO. It also has this entire 20 preventive controls, to enforce policies, and 3 detective controls. So some security box controls or guardrails are already out of the box what you are getting it. So that is an advantage of spinning up a new account from control tower versus importing or doing it on your own manually. Okay. So I'll quickly move towards the presentation and try to answer a couple of questions which asked to me, right? So generally, this is the implementation which I do for different of my customers, right? Like this is the same account. I mean, there is no secret sauce or nothing. Like each organization has its own different way of structuring the OUs and account. But this is how I do it, like the control tower accounts and the custom accounts. Now, also, if you see, I've deployed two OUs. One is called as a shared account, and second is called as a custom, right? Shared means all sorts of management or kind of accounts where I don't want to open up for my normal audience, right? Normal audience, I means the business audience or the business team. I want to keep it only for the DevOps, system admin, or the security team, right? So those are all the control tower accounts. Then comes the custom accounts. Custom accounts includes your networking, your workload related accounts, or again your shared services accounts, right? So simple, if I give an example, I think network account is very simple for everyone to understand. If you have connect for your on-prem and all, then you use the network account. Prod, non-prod, again, SDLCs, right? You have dev, UAT, testing, prod and all. Then you comes your shared account. Shared accounts like a common thing, right? Common shared services like Route 53 you talk about, CI/CD what you talk about, right? Those are your shared accounts which you use as an AWS shared service, shared account. Management is, let's say, if you have like proper billing for your own team, if you have something very specific to the management, right? Like you have your entire cloud watch or resource access manager, that gets into the accounts. So this how generally I put around when it comes to from an AWS account structure standpoint. But this is the way where exactly AWS gets into it, right? Someone asked me a questions also. I mean, in the chat that, hey, AWS, I mean, the control tower uses the service catalog, or can I bring my own accounts and other stuff, right? So this is how the OU structure looks like. We have this management account where we deploy on control tower. We deploy two OUs, right? The core OU and the custom OU. Each one has a baseline. I think Nambi also asked this question, hey, what do you get when you deploy this new account? We get the baseline security. With that baseline is nothing but the which I read, right? Couple of guardrails, control policies which you get is a baseline. The standard baseline what you get out of the box. Now, uh, I'll zoom in a bit on this management account. You deploy the control tower, which I just saw demoed you, right? Then the billing wise, it's very clear. What is this account factory? So now tell me, would it be making sense that I deploy the control tower one time and it works for years and years or decades? No, right? As even in a quarterly basis, I would say less than, forget about the decades or a year. Even every quarter, the business requirement changes or evolves, right? So you need something. And when I say evolves means you need some maybe new account you talk about or some other stuff, right? So how you can extend this framework? Like you deployed for the one time. Now, how you extend this framework, right? Extend is make it more repeatable. So that's where you need the service catalog or somewhere the account factory. So someone asked me, right, is control tower using service catalog? Absolutely. Control tower is using service catalog behind the scene as a repeatable framework to deploy the new accounts. So for now, for this demo, I'm only deploying 2 accounts, right? But when you talk about the full blown production setup, you will need at least like 6 to 8 accounts at minimum. So there you need something which can repeat that, and that's where you will see the service catalog coming out. Now, someone also asked me a question: what is a control tower and an OU differentiator? I think this diagram itself is very clear to understand the differentiator between the control tower and the OU. OU, as I explained you, is like a folder to store all the accounts. Whereas control tower is the entire deployment, automated, is an AWS service for automating the deployment of the landing zone. So OU is also one of the component or an entity which will get deployed when you're spinning up the landing zone via control tower. So don't get yourself confused a lot between OU and control tower. Control tower is just that service which is deploying that landing zone framework. OU helps landing zone to enforce certain security and guidelines for all the accounts which are part of that OU. So I'll take a pause. I mean, there were a couple of questions around that. So I'll take a pause and go through that question again. So yeah, I think one question was also before I go next. How does the control tower integrate with the third-party automation service? I think I have answered this. Billing account, yes, I've just shown you in that. How control tower is different from AWS organization? Rishi, I hope you're clear now how control tower differs from AWS OU. Rahul, you had a question on service catalog is part of control tower. I think I just mentioned that account factory is this entire pipeline which I talk about. Control tower and service security service integration, third party POV, right? I'll pause this question for a second. Arun, is master account known as a root account or the management account too? So again, root account, master account, management account. If I go back here, this is what you called as, right? Management account, right? Management account. Now, if I go one slide different, here also there is a management account, master account. So there are a couple of terms which are quite interchangeable, and that depends on your organization. But do remember that is called as one management account, right? Management account from terms of the control tower deployment. So once the entire thing is done, I will go back to the OU structure, right? Where you will see very clearly there is one account which is labeled as AWS management account. The management account is the account where you will have the control tower enabled, and that control tower is being given to all that accounts, right? So whatever you call master account, management account, root account, there has to be one account where you enable or from where you deploy the control tower. Next question is, what is the use of the proactive controls? Okay, good questions. Generally, from a security experts, and correct me, the experts out here, there are two approaches, right, for anything: proactive and reactive. Proactive is more preventive, and reactive is more fire up situation, and you have to go and do it. What is the use of proactive controls? Now, I'll tell you honestly, most of us on the call or in our organization, people will always forget to close the ports. Very simple example. They will keep the ports open to 000. And again, not only that, the height of insanity is that they will open it to all the protocols, like all 35364, all the protocols, they are going to open it to 000. Now we know people are going to make this a common mistake. The second common mistake, which lead to most of the attacks, is making the S3 bucket public. This is a very common scenario. Most of the organization would have deal with it. We know that there are some new people, very new on the cloud or new on the organization, are going to do that. Why we want to wait for the attackers to do the attack and then we do that reactive approach? We know these are the very basic things people are going to make mistakes. Or very simple thing: take an access secret key and put it into GitHub public repo. So that's where those are the very simple security things which should be leveraged or stopped at the proactive way rather than reactive. So that is why proactive way help you to minimize. I'm not saying proactive will help you to get the 100% security posture. No, but proactive will help you to make it more mature, and it is help you to block out of that 165, 55 to 65% of the security failures. So that is why proactive controls help you a lot. The next question is existing accounts are incorporated in the control tower. There is a conflict between their existing security setting versus the detective preventive controls in the control tower. Very good question. Yes, there are do some analysis that you have to do, right? For simple example, Cloud Trail, or you talk about the config. So when you do this landing zone, there has to be some analysis you have to do when you import the existing accounts in terms of the services which can get to conflict. And the conflict is not that you have config enabled, but the conflict is if you have that same control settings enabled, which will also be enforced by control tab, at that time you have to do it. So especially two things which I have also seen become somewhere problematic is config and cloud trail when you import the existing accounts. So do watch out of those two things. Now I think I missed answering one question, which was control tar and any security services, right? Uh, I'll go here in the OU, right? One second, in the security accounts. So let's say security account. So once I'll skip. Okay, yeah, yeah. So this is a perfect, right? Audit account is our security accounts and other thing. So now you can use any year, right? So many customers I have deal or talk to them where they need something called as Palo Alto, right? For the networking standpoint. Okta for security, or they have their own other IDS or web solution in place, right? Absolutely. You can integrate that. So the how you can integrate it, control tower is like deploying your framework, right? Your basic framework. Now, when it comes to Palo Alto, you talk about, or for Okta for SSO, that is an additional customization. So if you remember at the beginning, also I mentioned, and Nambi asked me one question about landing zone. I said many people have also tried to customize the control tower by their own tools and things. This is that example. So absolutely, you can bring your own tools and things, but that you are responsible for doing it. AWS is not going to automatically do it. Like for example, now out of the box, I'm going to get an AWS SSO. But if you want to do an Okta integration, then that is a customization you have to do it on top of it. AWS control tower is not going to do that. But yes, it provides an flexibility that you can integrate Okta. So I hope I have answered all the questions which were there in the chat so far. I think there are a couple of more questions are there before I move ahead. Please share some common use cases for using aid OUs in thing. How do you assign policies in OU in AWS Control Tower? I think just hold off on the second point. Please some common use cases for using OUs in Control Tower, right? I think I just explained a while back, right? That why exactly to Rishi or Rahul, I explained you that, okay, why exactly OU you need it. And same, I'll show you. One, the control tower is deployed successfully. I'll take you towards that OU landing page, and then you will understand why exactly or what are the common use cases about that, right? Existing AWS OU comes under control tower, or it can just stay. Uh, Ideally, it cannot be there. The reason is, as I said, right? Your entire OU, when you deploy the control tower, you have to deploy from the scratch OU, right? So you can replicate it manually the same structure, but you cannot import as is. You have to singly get all the accounts imported. So that means your current, your previous OU structure or the OU account, master account will not be actual master accounts when you import in the control tower. Control tower will have its own master account. So absolutely you can replicate the same OU structure for you, but you cannot import as is. One will always have a root account, not necessary to have a management account. So absolutely, I think what you, as I said right at the beginning also, Rahul, you talk about master account, you talk about root account, or you talk about management account. These are all interchangeable terms. So what you refer as root account, someone will refer as master account, someone will refer as a management account. From a control tower deployment standpoint, there is a language called as AWS management account, which is that root account, master account, or management account, an account from where you will enable or deploy the control tower. So that's what we have to focus on, that there is a one central entity. From that entity, you're going to deploy the control account, you're going to deploy the control tower. Now you call this as a root, you call this as a management or master. As I said, that term differ from organization to organization.
Sanchit, one question from my side. So the control tower, so we would have one root account or management account, right? So we, when you started those provisioning now, But once it is done and I have a couple of child accounts from OU has been created, can I trigger one more inside another child account? From there, I can create one more, I mean, convert that child account as in a root account and as for a small arc structure.
So you, as I said, right, there can be only one root account. So I think your question was, can I import existing child account? Yes, you can do that. Can I put this into any OU? Yes, you can do that. But can I make the child account as a root account? No, you cannot. There has to be only one master or management account as per the control tower. So you
Now,
cannot move it.
what I was asking is, can I trigger that? I mean, can I go to the control tower service and then trigger another organization setup? I mean, child organization setup under that,
Yes, you can. You can create a child OU.
not as an OU, again, as an another setup, like whatever you have done now. Can
No,
I
you
trigger
cannot.
some?
So you cannot trigger it again once it is done, right? So you can do it. Like for example, once you set up this framework, okay, once you have this entire OU structure in place, now all the accounts which are part of this entire landing zone deployment, you cannot spin it again without decommissioning the existing one.
Okay. So the
There is
control tower service itself would be disabled, is it? So I cannot use that service.
not disabled. I would say you cannot deploy again because it will give a conflict with your OU structure.
Okay.
So deployment will fail, right? Now, what you can do, let's say you make some mistake when deploying it, right? Now you want to reuse those accounts. You made some mistake. You want to reuse that account. So what you can do in that case is you can decommission the control tower and have all of those accounts released or removed from the OU, spin up a new master account and deploy the control tower from there and import those existing accounts in that. So in short, if you want to swap your control tower config or you want to get rid of your control tower, then you have to get rid of your master account and then swap new account and import that all the child accounts in that. Okay.
Yeah. Thank
So,
you.
cool. So as we can see, I think we are almost there with our deployment. Uh, we are almost there. I think it's the last thing, which is the mandatory accounts are going on. And if I go through my email, there would be already a bunch of emails are there, right? For the IAM SSO, your account is ready, right? As well as you have this control tower notifications, right? So what I will do is, one second, I'll mark this thing. Okay, cool. So I'll go quickly to a couple of slides. I think we have already covered up. So before we go and play around with our control tower, let me go through this couple quickly. AWS OU, right? I think I've mentioned very clearly a simple example. One sec. So AWS OU, as I mentioned as an example, is more like a folder, right? That folder has all the different accounts. Now, simple example, a folder can have a subfolder can have accounts and other things. You can have that proper tree structure, right? So when I say folder, does not mean that it cannot have one subfolder. No, absolutely, you can have another subfolder. Within that subfolder also you can have folder. So it depends on you how you're designing that. But OU is just like a folder, and from that folder you can define and manage your organization accounts, control the permissions. Someone also asked me about how I can permissions and other stuff. I'll come up with that topic too quickly. So you can manage the permissions, you can audit and monitor your compliances, shared resources across OUs, and manage the billing. So all sorts of maintenance and operational things what you can do across, I mean, within the OUs, right? So it's very important when you're designing the OUs, sit down, think aloud, and then you design the OUs. Again, there is no hard and fast rule. You can move the accounts from OUs, right, easily. But it's very important that you design the right posture of OUs based on how you're going to or how your organization is going to evolve. Again, control tower, self-service automation to automate the setup of new AWS multiple accounts. We just have gone through that control tower. AWS service offerings, best practices, blueprint, which is consistent, baseline foundation in terms of security, and a single glass. Single glass means this, if I go to this dashboard, there is this single account. Let me close this. There is a single account where I'll get all of my details in terms of the control tower. As of now, it shows the basic. Even in future, if you keep adding new account, all the detail of how many accounts you have, how many are compliant accounts, compliant in terms of the securities, all of the details, you will get it from here itself. a single glass or a dashboard view where you can get the entire view of it. The best part of control tower is not just it automates it, but it also enables security compliances, right? Security compliance, like someone asked me, right? I have control tower, account factory, service catalog, right? Does control tower use a service catalog? Yes. And as I mentioned, account factory is an example where you can use this preventive guardrails, different accounts, and you can work around it, right? So out of the box itself, you don't have to worry about wiring and making sure everything is working fine. Is we are compliant, not compliant, manually logging into and do all of this stuff. Control tower can help you to simplify that. So not only it help you to simplify the deployment of the infrastructure, but also to maintain the security and compliance. Plus, it also provides you the agility and governance. In this current time, the one of the word, two of the words I would say, frugality and agility, everyone loves it. They want to run faster at lower cost. So agility and governance. Governance is very simple. I was talking to you, I didn't enable any SSO, but still when control tower got deployed, it also deployed the AWS SSO. So think of manually you have to deploy SSO, link with all of your accounts, do ASO, assume roles and other stuff. That also is also completely automated with control tower. So when you just deploy a simple form, you get this basic posture of account and OU, security, plus your governance out of the box. And here are the different things what you can do, right? I think there are a couple of questions were in the chat in terms of the third party and all. So one is this thing what we have done, control tower, OU, and service catalog. From the cost standpoint, you can also have budget, you can have license manager and marketplace. Since you have this proper OU structure, there are many advantages what you can leverage. From a security standpoint, you have the CloudTrail, Config, Security Hub, and CloudWatch, right? And as well as the well architect review tool, right? Which is available in all the accounts. So over a time, you can improve and optimize, improvise your entire setup. So couple of tips and tricks, right? Again, I'm not going to zoom in a bit in tips and trick for the other slides because those are very repeatable and that's what I have seen my experiences. Again, my experiences can be very limited. It depends on your personal, but what exactly? Now, as I mentioned, you need to have network account, you need to have log monitoring, you need to have the workload accounts. What should go in which account or what should not go in that account? That kind of documentation, what I'm sharing as in my memory map, you can refer and you can customize it. So it becomes very easy for your reference when you're deploying for your organization. So someone asked me about SCP or how I can protect or secure the OU, right? So that is called as service control policies, right? Service control policies sit into middle of your organization and the account level where it can not only operates on the OU, it can also operates on the account where it help you what you can do, what you can't, right? The list of APIs that are allowed, whitelisted, list of APIs that are blocked, so blacklisted, right? So that's what SCP help you to control everything. SCP, you can think of very simple example is a superset of the IAM, where it works across all of your entire all the accounts to help you the control. Something like this structure. You have your SCP structure on the root level, which denies access to at OU level itself, right? Then you have the OU level. So think of you have this parent OU, I mean the root OU, you have all the parent OU, and then you have all the accounts. SCP operates on the core root as well as on the OU level as well as on the account level. So let's say you disabled in any organization, let's say you disabled port 25. That port 25 should not be account available in any account, irrespective whoever it is. You can just disable it on the root level itself. By default, all the OU, sub OUs, and accounts will inherit it. Let's say the financial data should not get deleted or decommissioned. So that you can apply on the financial OU, the OU which is spin up for the financial team. You can do that. Let's say there are some conditions you want to give it specific to that account because there is HIPAA data or CI data. So those you can apply on the account level. But the simple idea of having the SCPs is the consolidation of the permission, right? What you can do at different account rather than going on services wise within that account, which can be done via IAM. That's why I use a term called as superset of the IAM. Now I'll quickly go through this or scan through the slides, right? As I said, this is my experience. You can deny it, or you can refer it, or you can even customize it. I just want to give it a list, which generally I do follow when I'm deploying the control tower, which will help you at least the starter kit kind of thing. So organization master, right? Organization master, as I said, right? There is one master account when you deploy the control tower. This is that account. Don't do anything in this account outside deploying the control tower, or you want to have billing, or you want to have any SCPs, right? So control tower, billing, SCPs. These are the only three things what you should do in the OU master account. Foundational accounts, foundational is that shared thing which we also deployed for security and infrastructure, where based on it you can have the entire building block, security infrastructure. The security infrastructure can also have their dev, UAT, and prod account, right? Log archive, simple to understand, right? You can have a bucket, all the CloudWatch logs getting synced to that bucket. The bucket has an MFA, it has all sorts of versions and those kinds of stuff. So it cannot delete it, right? And it becomes single source of truth. You have proper logs, alarms on CloudTrail, CloudWatch, and all. Security accounts, again, you have all sorts of forensic. I mean, security account can also have different accounts, right? Your forensic team can have it. Maybe your security SecOps team can have it, where you owned by the security team, enable them security operations and limited access and other stuff. Shared services, like simple example is network account, right? Network account is the best example of shared service because that will be shared across all the accounts. Or any kind of think of your open your access to your on-prem, right? Your data centers which are on premise, that is like common because you have that connection and that connection will go to dev, UAT, and prod. So those are the examples of shared services where shared service like the accounts which are part of the shared services. Or Okta. Another best example can be the Okta. Networking, I just mentioned. Anything which you need in terms of networking, maybe it is the transit gateway you talk about, direct connect you talk about, or VPC letters, which is a new service. Everything should be in the networking account. Workloads, very simple to understand. Whatever the different workloads you have based on your teams, based on your business units, you have that workloads. And then workloads also includes the SDLC aspect of it. Like your dev, UAT, prod also are the different accounts part of that the workload only. So this is how the summary model looks like. Whatever I have just quickly recap. If I squeeze it together in one slide, so this is that memory model looks like to you. Like you have the security, foundational OU, you have the security, you have this infrastructure, sandbox, workloads, the policies. I mean, you can ignore the suspended. Suspended is like you don't need the OUs and you can move it here. Policy staging, business users, exceptions, and deployment. So in one shot, one single glass, if you want to see what I deploy for different customers or what AWS suggests, and this is the view. This is how you should do, or this is how you should cleanly maintain all of your accounts. Before I go to the questions, I want to take this one slide quickly. AWS organization, AWS landing zone, AWS control tower. What should I do? Where I should do? Right? I think most of the common question. If you are a new customer, please directly go for control tower. The same thing what I did. I am a new customer. I just spin up my new account. Simply go for the control tower. Use out of the box guardrail blueprint, right? And the account factory. If you are an existing customer, I think someone did also ask me about this. Native control tower CloudWatch events and reference implementation, beta to use control tower in the existing AWS organization. You move from the landing zone to the control tower. New control tower, you have a current AWS landing zone customer. Upgrade. There are different versions of control tower and different patches, what that's there. So upgrade it, replace your control tower code with the, replace your landing zone code with the control tower functionality and extensibility framework with it. There is an AWS blog is there, how to switch from landing zone to control tower. If time permits, I'll pull up that link and share it on the chat. Or if not, and I'll share it with Nambi along with presentation. You can reach out to him where it shows how to switch from landing zone to control tower too. And when I say landing zone to control tower is not the framework. I'm talking about the landing zone solution, which is via cloud formation. I'll take a pause here before we go to the last topic. Any questions on this so far? I think there is one question. Monitor and log activity across all the accounts under AWS control tower setup. Is there any specific industry specific example? Absolutely. So control tower, if I talk about as per last year, 2022, control tower was just a generic framework. Now, if you Google, AWS has launched the industry specific control tower. For higher ed, you talk about, for retail, you talk about, for insurance, you talk about. Now, what is the magic in industry specific thing, right? Are they putting any color flavors on it? No. Are they doing anything else? No. There, exactly what they do is any sorts of compliances, right? Each industry has their own sets of compliances. Like HIPAA or healthcare has its own compliances, insurance has its own compliances for PII data, retail has its own. So that compliances is what they took and put that as a guardrail into the control tower. So whatever you saw, that preventive guardrails, right? That has modified, fine-tuned as per the industries. One another example was, if you see, when I was deploying, there were certain things which was, hey, do you have, what is the bare minimum log monitoring you want to do, or what you want to have any specific stuff. Those all things are also AWS help or guide if you go for the industry specific, right? So that's how any industry specific could be there. And another example, if I talk about, generally what I see is, when in terms of the monitoring and logging, right? You have the logs which are generated for your applications, and there are certain compliances in industry where you want to save those logs for 7 years. In insurance, that is the case. Even in healthcare, when you process the data, you want to store the logs. So one option is the logs which are generated from the application, you take that, put it into S3. Now the problem is, since even though someone from the business team do have the access to the that particular prod account, right? Maybe some senior superior manager do have it. So that's not a clean way still to, you can say, I am very compliant, my log cannot be accessed by someone else, or right? Because the business team do have the access. So what happens in this kind of a controlled, clean setup, even though the logs get generated, the logs completely move out of that business application after a period of time, and it goes to the central account, which is with the central unit team. So in case if you need, you can refer, you have to go talk to them and do that and follow that clean hierarchy there. So that's one of the best example of monitor log activity across all the accounts using control tower setup. The next question is, can we enable tagging for untagged and abundant resources using SCP? Absolutely, you can do that. You can have enforce. So, I mean, you cannot automated way to do it, right? But what you can do is, there are two things. One, you flag how many resources are not compliant by putting an SCP. For simple example, you need to have a project and environment tag as mandatory for all the resources. Once you enable that, you get at least a view in a single glass pane on the config how many resources are not compliant by doing that. So those are the advantages what you get when you have the SCP there. The important point which I want to cover, and again, if you have more questions, please put it in the chat. The next important point is, what is data residency and why it matters. I'll talk about this and an example also. I think we just did data redundancy also, residency also, when we were deploying the control tower. So what is data residency first? Data residency is a requirement to store or process data in a particular geographical location. I think it's very clear, right? When you're working with any US customer, they will say, I want all of my data in US. When you're working with any Europe, they will say, I want my any Europe because I have GDPR, I have this compliances, I have CCPA. Fine. But how we can make sure with help of control tower? How, what is it? I mean, how exactly control tower can help in that? That has to be on the business team, right? So that's where the control tower help. And especially I was talking about the regulatory or industry flavor, right? Data residency is one of the key feature what AWS included in control tower and made it more industry thing. So if you remember, I mentioned when I was deploying the control tower, I told you that, okay, I'm selecting a region and I'm enabling that region, which I will explain later on. So that region is called as data residency. But when I enable the control tower, I told control tower that only deploy and allow any user to access and play around with the home region. Don't allow to play them in another region. And if I want to allow another region, then explicitly what are the secondary region where I talk about the DR and other aspect. So that's how control tower help you to also get the data residency things, right? And we all know why do you need data residency thing. For regulatory, contractual, or corporate policies, you want to make sure that data does not move out of that geographical region. And there are many challenges, especially even in the multi account, right? There were many challenges because you have to manually disable it. If someone forget to disable it, it is a high risk that your data can move out from that region. But if there are by default controls, preventive controls are already in place or enforced from day one, no one even can access another region. Forget about moving the data. And that's where, as I said, right? Guardrails are very easy in control tasks, and you can see that the base example, it did. I mean, I didn't have to do anything. I just have to select a radio button, enabled, disabled, or which are the secondary accounts where you should do. And within few seconds, the data residency can be achieved using guardrails, using AWS control task. And this is how it looks like. I think someone asked me, can I do SCPs and other stuff, right? So there are preventive guardrails and detective guardrails, right? Preventive is like just a proactive way where you can have the guardrails, SCP enabled in all the accounts part of that OU. Detective also same the guardrails and config, right? There you will use detective. Wherever you heard term called as detective, always do remember AWS config will be the service for the detective approach, where you enable it for all the accounts and you identify whether there is all compliant or not compliant. So this way, with that single glass view, the statement which was there, with help of this preventive and detective approach, which Control Tower provides, you can get all sorts of view and inventory of all of your resources. And the use cases are very simple. Like as I talk about different industries, different compliant workload or data generated, you need to make sure that your data is staying within that region. It does not move to internet or it does not move to any other region where you get into any sorts of issues in terms of the compliance. And here exactly data residency, preventive and detective cartels. I think when we deployed, you saw there are by default 20 guardrails were already out of the box provided as a detective, right? So these are those couple of 20 which it looks like, and four of the preventive it looks like. What exactly does? Like deny to other AWS regions, disable internet access, disable VPN, cross region, right? Cross region in terms of another regions which are not been enabled. From a detective standpoint, check the entire replication is there or not, public access is there, IP addresses, and those kinds of stuff. So data residency makes control tower more close to what the expectations are in the industry in terms of the compliance, security, and the best practices. So that's all what majorly I had from the session standpoint. I will move to the demo part, right? Before we go to the questions. So as we can see here, this was the control tower which I deployed in the demo. You can see now the landing zone is available, right? And here you can click and play around with it, right? So before I do this, you can see here I have already the accounts which are there, right? So this is a SSO. Let me accept the invite for the SSO quickly. So here I will give my password. Okay. And I'll set the password here. So as I said, I have not enabled, I mean, I've just deployed the control tower. I have not enabled the SSO or nor I have integrated it. By default, I get the entire SSO enabled out of the box, right? So I will just do a next. I will sign in. And here you will see the SSO is not only implemented on the master account, but it is also implemented in all the child accounts also. So these are the three accounts which I enabled, right? Audit, master, and this, right? Now I have logged in here with the my credential, the root account credentials. This way, when by default, when I deploy control tower, you also get the SSO out of it, right? Now, SSO, and here you see the notification. The notification also we have to choose. This is a notification for any sort of drift which is happening on control tower. You'll get that notification also in this box, right? For any security, any drift that's happening, you will get that notification also in this account. So that's the best part. And if you see, this notification is from the security account. Is from the security account. So that's how the controller, when you deploy it, not just deploy the basic account, it comes all consolidation of the security, SSO, and other sorts of baselining package, which I was talking about. And you can also add or register your new OUs here, right? So let's wait for a second. So here, if you see, someone asked me that, okay, 1 second. Someone asked me, can I add an OU or other stuff? So this is the root OU, right? This is your entire control tower master account. This is my security posture. Sandbox does not have any account, but this is how the account looks like. So security, sandbox, and this. Now here also you can select and you can create organizational unit or the account. So you can do and play around everything here in the control tower. So that's how you can play around with the control tower. You can expand this. I mean, this is a very, I would say, 40% of the magic of control tower, what I've shown you. You can expand more in terms of your other accounts, and you can do that entire full blown implementation of that control tower. And if you want to decommissioning the control tower ever, go to the landing zone settings, go to this entire decommission, and select on decommission landing zone. It will take 2 to 3 hours, which it will deploy. And if you want to understand what exactly on which is a new version, so currently we are using a new version 3.2 of landing zone, which is June 16, 2023. So they also have a different definitions of landing zones, right? Like how you have the new updates of any software, landing zone also has a new release. And for any new release, you have to select and repair or update, and automatically it will get updated with the new definition of the landing zone. So that's the best part about the landing zone. I'll take a pause. Any questions you have on the landing zone now? I think I left 1 second. Okay. After a control tower is set up, having large number of accounts, can we use CloudFormation to then deploy any additional services or configuration? No, ideally, I would say don't use the CloudFormation. Control tower provides the service catalog. So you use that the same. You can use CloudFormation if you want to do any subjective specific within that account. Within the account, if you want to do something, let's say, for example, you want to deploy a web server, then you can absolutely, you can go and do cloud formation within that dev U18 account, which is the application. But if you want to do any configuration, account configuration activities or security, I would highly request you go with the control tower, because the advantage of doing the control tower, I mean, there is no such like a you can't do or you should, I mean, you are not allowed. I mean, you're allowed to do with cloud formation, but that will be very limited to that particular account. It won't become a repeatable blueprint. It does not become a repeatable blueprint. So that is an advantage. You should use control tower, not cloud formation. Can you share the link regarding industry specific control tower setup? Absolutely. Give me, I mean, I'll share it before the end of this session. I'll share the APN blog as well as that link for the industry specific, what AWS talks about. Once a control tower setup, what kind of task we get in the management control tower, right? So I think I just shown that, right? This is 1 sec dashboard. So this is that control tower, right? Where you have the shared accounts and all those kinds of stuff. And this is what kind of a, let me close this. This is a kind of view which you get from that one single glass of pane, what exactly is happening across all the accounts, how many are compliant, secured, and all of the stuff. You get all the controls also here, right? The controls, what we talk about, the preventive controls and all. So those are the different accounts. You can enable and disable it from here too. So that is what you get when you deploy the control tower and it is deployed successfully. Then the next question is, I assume the control tower can be applied on the OU or organizational level and as well as on the OU level. The control tower can be applied on the organizational level and OU level, absolutely, on the new OU level. That's what we have done just now. Guardrail, is it like a framework? Can we create custom? Absolutely, spot on. Guardrail is a very generic term, right? Guardrail is to stop, to prevent. You can have your own custom guardrails also. You can define your own custom guardrails. You can use the AWS guardrails. So yes, you're right. It's like a security framework or preventive measures which you can apply. There was a mention single break in one of the single glass pane, right? Absolutely. I just showed you, right? Single glass pane is that single view or UI from where you can interact with your system and other stuff, which I just demonstrated to you. Can we remove account email from account selection in the SSO dashboard? Can we remove account email from account selection in the email dashboard? I didn't understand this use case about it. Why you want to remove the emails? Because generally, I mean, this is for the demo purpose. I have shown you this entire control tower setup, right? The master account. In the normal scenario, this account will be only with your leads, the senior leads or the management. This won't be used in a common use. So you don't have to worry about this, all this stuff.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sanchit.
Yeah.
Actually, my question is that in that SS code login, you can see our emails which are given to particular accounts, right? Can we disable from that login page?
So when you talk about the SSO, that entire thing, right, which account you have given, that is specific to your own email account.
Yeah, if you open that login page, you can list the number of accounts and number of accounts, right? There you can see the emails over that one, account ID and email. It is a security issue. Suppose can we disable this from this login page?
Yeah, you cannot. I mean, basically, you cannot remove this. This is a by default which AWS provides. Generally, what
Okay.
I've seen, like if you're a little bit worried about this email ID, you can maybe use some third-party providers there, like Okta and all. But yeah, this page is by default provided by AWS SS, so we cannot customize this.
Even in Opt also, it's I mean visible only. Actually, we are
Right.
doing the same practice,
In case
and
of
we are a bit worried about this. I mean, email ID visible over to the wider audience.
let me check if there is any sort of customization.
Yeah,
Let me make a note of it. I'll just make a note of it and I'll see if there is any sorts of customization or thing has been done on this from some open source perspective.
yeah. Thanks for that.
Sure. I will make a note of this one.
Sanjit, in your experience, have you seen more than one landing zone is provisioned? I mean, more than one, I mean, like 2, 3 landing zone setups are done, or it's just every organization, they just go with one landing zone setup. And under that, they'll create multiple OUs and provision it.
So to best of my knowledge, I've seen only one landing account for now because what happens is, right, I mean there are many ifs and buts, okay, where I've seen this. End of the day, if you are into that one organization, right, which is handled by same management, then I've seen one landing zone because end of the day, everything get consolidated that master route. And as I talk about that for the landing zone, you need to be in that master route account, otherwise you cannot do that. So from that reason perspective, I've only seen one control tower. But if you are into that organization where you're fine and you have different OUs itself, right? Different OU, I mean different master account. In that case, I've seen different control tower. Like each team or each business app team can deploy their own. So it all depends on how exactly your AWS account has been there. Uh, there is no plus and minus here. Like I won't say that okay, if you deploy multiple accounts, multiple landing zone, you get advantages, or if you don't deploy, you get advantages. No, my only thing is, if you deploy one or you deploy two, the kind of flexibility, the kind of agility is common across all, right? As we saw that SCP structure also, The SCB structure is not just working on the root level, on the OU level, as well as on the account level. So if you are in that thought process that enabling one control tower or landing zone will hinder my speed or agility, absolutely not. But other way around, I see an advantage of having one landing zone is if there are, I mean, all of us are living in that world where we want to get more and more compliant, right? And security. Many a times, if you have multiple places to handle it, there are chances that you make mistake to enable certain things on the other side of the world, right? But if you have that one single view, you will make sure that you have the things which you enable. There, for example, I gave one example also during the session. There are many organizations which disabled port 25, the email port, right? SMTP port. Now, if you have this two implementation, you have to do that same thing at two places, the STPs, which is not complicated, but you have to remember that you have to enable it. But if you have that one landing zone or control tower implementation, you enable it one, whatever you have 100 accounts, 200 accounts, it will get through all the accounts if you do it on the root level. So that maintenance becomes easier compared to having two setup around it. But again, it is very subjective. Like there are organizations where, let's say, you are parent, I mean sister on institutes, right? Sister or organization, where you want to have your billings and other things tracked completely isolated. In that case, you can have two landing zone implementation, where it's you can think of like two different institute only. Okay, so that's what the rationalize I would say when it comes to multiple implementation of landing zone or control tower. Do we need to set up control tower in every region, or there is one control tower for all regions? No, absolutely not. You can expand, as I said, right? When I was talking about the data residency or when I deploying it, deploy landing zone in one region, you can expand that to all the regions, whatever you will be working on. So let's say you are working in all the US regions, then I would say don't go and deploy the landing zone. And as I said also, right, control tower will be on the OU level, which is not regional, which is a global thing. So it's not region, but again, you can enable and disable the region within the control tower. So I think I've answered most of the questions. If I missed any questions, please put it in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them. And again, if you have further any questions and you want to reach out to me, scan this barcode, or you can ping me on the LinkedIn. Follow me for any sorts of AWS help, any of the things what you need. You please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll try my best to answer you with an examples or implementations.
And Sanjit, once we create this control tower and landing zone, right? So we would be using account factory to provision the way that we wanted, right? The accounts that we wanted.
Exactly. Absolutely. So that's what I said, right? Just stop sharing my screen. Let me share my screen again. Give me 1 second. Is my screen visible?
No. Now it is loading.
Okay. Is my screen visible now? Okay. So here you see service control, account factory. Account factory is nothing but that pipeline which triggers a service catalog to deploy the new account. So we started with only log and account. So if you want to spin up like something similar, like 1 second, I'm spinning this faster. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. Huh. So something like this, right? This entire OU structure where you want to have this entire workload OUs and other stuff also. Absolutely, you can use that that entire pipeline of account factory, which is nothing but the service catalogs and bunch of other configurations, and you can do it. Also, thanks for reminding me, Nami, on that. Service catalog is not just the only service which control tower use for spinning up the new other things, right? There are a bunch of other small configurations like you talk about Lambda, SNS, and all. Because Service catalog is more a repeatable solution, a playbook which you will repeat. But when you spin up a new account, you have to register it back to the control tower. You have to tell control tower, I am up and running. Please put me under your list. Please tag me to OU. Please enable all the guardrails. There is this back and forth communication that takes place internally. We don't have to worry about, but just from a knowledge standpoint, that transaction takes place, which is done by some other services also, like Lambda, SNS, and other things. So service catalog is not just the only service in that entire pipeline. It's a pipeline of account factory. And someone asked me about Terraform also, right? Terraform has the best example of that account factory pipeline, what I'm talking about. To launch a new account, to scale this pattern, or to make this pattern go across different accounts. There was another question. How to add vocals in how to add VPCs in account created by the model? Absolutely good question. The VPC creation is you have to do it in your account. VPC creation is not automated, that you have to do it. So VPC you talk about transit gateway. That is what something you have to do it in your account, and there where you can use things like cloud formations or your automated solutions, right? So still, the aspect which I talk about the customization is that customization. So there are many organizations that I've seen. Even if I talk about the implementation, what we do or I do it, we have this entire package end to end. So the package is end to end. When I say is, it is end to end, like deploying the control tower, deploying this entire account factory, deploying all sorts of VPCs, transit gateway, and other thing, and as well as also integration with the third party like Okta and other thing. So that covers up your entire end to end solution, which every other partners or organization have customized it, some flavor of that.
And what is the basic IAM role that gets created, Sanchit? I think the accounts that we provision.
Administrator.
Okay, so that's the only one that gets created.
Yes. So by default, if I go to the SSO page for a second quickly, if you see by default, everything is SSO. Sorry, administrator. This is the admin account what we created, right? Audit and log. By default as the administrator, then you can customize it in the SSO, like based on your teams and your requirement, and you can define that hierarchy here.
Okay. And I think in the management account, we see the service catalog and user access as well.
Yes. Yes. That is that account factory pipeline. Any other questions I can help to answer? And again, I'll try to search during when you are having the more questions. I'll just share a couple of links quickly before we end the session. One is the APN blog you talk about. One you talk about. I think there were one was the APN blog to transfer the landing zone. There was one more link someone requested around it, right?
For the industry specific control tower
Yes,
setup.
thanks. Yes, industry specific landing zone. And if there is any other, I think there's a good AWS repo is also given on the landing zone, GitHub repo. I'll share that.
And one more thing, Sanjit, say for example, I have a SCP in place where I have stating that I don't want the IAM users to create a NAT gateway or internet gateway, right? SCP is applied to the organization level, OU level. So will there be an impact if I do the same with the control tower? Say for example, in the control tower, I have a setting in the beginning where I can say deny the region specific only. So how come it gels with the SAP as well as with the control tower settings?
Okay, basically, end of the day, do remember control tower. I think there is some echo.
No.
Okay, so let's go back to the basics, right? As I said, control tower is more as a service to enable the landing zone. Landing zone is a framework, right? Now you have certain framework or policies which you enabled in SCPs. So what you have to do is the SCPs what you have enabled, where exactly you have enabled that SCPs. You will enable it on the OU level. You will enable on the account level or you will enable on the root level. So there won't be conflict between the control tower in that particular OU unless you restrict it to the administrator on the user which control tower will use to deploy this, the root account and all. Unless you're not doing that, you will be fine, but you have to make sure that after the control tower is enabled, you need to extend that to the control tower. So any new users or the SSOs or the accounts which get created also has that particular part of it.
Okay. And my question was regarding that normally when we provision a account using account factory, right, we have the service catalog. There is a setting where it has a custom VPC and subnet range. My question was that, say for example, apart from the VPC which is being produced via account factory, if I'm going to create another additional VPC, say another additional VPC, how come can I able to create it easily like a normal VPC which I do in a normal AWS account, or do I have any restriction with sort of it? That
No,
was my question.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. You can do it. The only recommendation I would only have is, so again, it's very subjective. It depends on how you're deploying your network layer, right? In the control tower. Control tower is very
Hmm.
flexible on it. So you can have 5 VPC in your accounts, right? There is no restriction on it. You are feel free. The only thing is, let's say if you're using a transit gateway, I hope you know about transit gateway, right? Which is more like a
Yeah.
central hub and spoke. So if you're using a transit gateway, then you have to make sure that new VPCs are synced with the transit gateway, but there is no restriction. As I said, right, this is a posture, security posture. This is not like a proper, this is not like your, what I can say, very fixed framework that this is only you have to do. No, absolutely not. You can have your own CI/CD, you can have your own networking, you can do whatever you want on that.
Okay. And regarding security, right, since a control tower help us in a centralized management, so how come I can able to get the security notifications monitored and I can respond to them? Say, for example, we have a shared account where we have this log and archive account where the security findings have been mapped across the account which has been part of control tower. So how I can say, for example, if I implement security hub, there is a score for it. So the score has been for some 5 accounts been I have added. So say for example I have a less score for that security app. So how I can see everything in a centralized place and make sure I can able to mitigate the security issues.
Good question. I would answer it in two parts. Okay. So give me 1 second. Let me just put a charger to my laptop. Give me 1 minute. Okay. So part one of the question, I think you only answered your question, right? So I'll give you part one. So you said consolidation of all the things on the security hub of all the accounts. Okay. So that's one of the part of the control tab. The beauty of the control tab that it consolidate everything under one thing. Two, you said that there is already a shared account where you have this audit and security about it, right? So that's exactly what do. Third, if you see, I accepted a SNS notification which was for the security alerts, right? In my inbox, there were two emails with there. One was for
Yes.
the SSO and second was for the SNS. That SNS is for the security that was generated from the audit account.
Okay. So you mean to say that whatever the security issues come, I will get an SNS in a single mail so that I can go to the control tower and I can fix with the respective account.
Exactly. The only thing where you have to do is SNS is there, security is there. You have to customize it or integrate it to what level you need to get the notification.
Okay, got it.
Like, you need to get to all the errors and other thing, right? The whole, the beauty of control tower is exactly to solve what you just said, right? How, there are things which we all do in bits and pieces, right? Bits and pieces on account level, bits and pieces in terms of provisioning best practices, bits and pieces and remediation. How we can consolidate everything in one single glass or one single strategy. That's exactly the whole motive of control tower is. That's why you see the log monitoring, everyone on the call here will be doing log monitoring, right? In the some form, some shape. Very basic like CloudWatch. Everyone is doing some sort of a security with CloudTrail. How we can consolidate everything under one roof in their respective accounts in terms of the compliance, in terms of remediation. That's the whole, I would say, the need of or the motive of having the control tower.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Yeah, I think you also answered a lot of questions in the chat as well, Sanchit. I think is um, anybody has any other questions?
And also, just one thing, I've just shared all the three links which I was talking about, right? The landing zone page, where if you scroll down a bit, you will get the industry flavor of that. Second is the GitHub repository about landing zone. And third is if you want to move from landing zone to control tab, then that's a AWS link.
Okay. Yeah, I think we are not seeing any more questions. Um, Thanks a lot, Sanchit. Thanks for bringing so much energy. So right through the presentation, I could see that energy and getting to us. I mean, I could also, digest those information that you started to share from the beginning. Thank you so much for that presentation and sharing the control tower knowledge. And I've also seen audience where also was, so interactive and is giving a lot of, asking a lot of questions. So I feel everybody would have got something out of this session, specifically on the control tower. Um, thanks a lot, Sanchit. Again, one more time. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And I think there's one question which was left is around the customizing the SSO page. I've never come across that scenario, so I will have a look into it and I'll get back to you offline. I'll share that offline. And yeah, I'll ship this presentation, Nambi, to you. You can circulate to all the people who have registered for the session.
Yes. And I, at the end of the session, I usually have for virtual networking. If anybody is interested, you can stay online, so we can have just just a chat on the general things, not on the specific topics. So if you want to have a virtual networking, feel free to stay in the call. So, and you can turn on the video. We can chat. And I thought if there are a lot of people, we can do the breakout session as well, 5 minutes for 2, 3 people. So if anybody is interested, you can just message in the chat, so we can have that breakout session as well if required, or we can just turn on and then speak anything that you wanted to speak on AWS or general introduction. And we can create our networking. And just one more thing. So we have this session every month, third or fourth week. I'll when you can message in our group if any specific topic that you wanted to have in the next month, so we can create that content on that.
Sanjit, regarding the same topic, so what are the challenges you faced during the setup? I mean, it's a managed service by AWS, but apart from that, in your setup, what is the challenge you faced?
Absolutely.
Respective anything?
Absolutely. So see, I'll tell you, okay, as I mentioned when I was talking about also, right? As I mentioned, uh, landing zone is, I would say, in the entire security posture, landing zone is like 30-40% of what you do, right? There's still a 60% of journey what you